That's how badly America wants a culture change.
So just to sum up, you would support him for president even if he's convicted in classified documents. You support him for president even though you believe he contributed to an insurrection. You support him for president even though you believe he's lying about the last election. You'd support him for president even if he's convicted in the Manhattan case. I just want to say the answer to that is yes, correct?
Yeah, me and 51% of America.
Governor, thanks for your time this morning. Up next, Arizona puts the abortion debate.
Wow. Now, much more from the interview to play for you. We'll circle back to that moment after you're filled in on the full context. But that was Republican, but sort of moderate Republican, as he'd be described, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who you might remember advocated aggressively on behalf of Nikki Haley's candidacy and had some sharp criticisms for Donald Trump, begged the Republican Party to move on from Trump. But now, as we see all too often with these Republicans, once Trump's the guy, they line up behind him. And why is their party controlled by Donald Trump? Something Chris Sununu resents? Because people like Chris Sununu do stuff like that and are okay with the fact that someone who he's admitted, I guess the wording he used as George Stephanopoulos specified, is contributed to an insurrection, but as we know, caused and led and coordinated an attempt to block the peaceful transfer of power. Yes, the attack on the Capitol being the climax of that, but you had the fake elector scheme and the pressuring of local officials to engage in fraud and allies of Trump breaching voting sites, this crazy coup attempt trying to overthrow our lawful democratic process to keep him in office. And Chris Sununu is willing to admit to some of that and still go, but I mean, Biden might lower prescription drug costs too much, so that would be bad. And thus he's going to support Donald Trump. It's crazy. Truly crazy stuff. And I've not seen a more humiliating moment on national television than that in a really long time, where George Stephanopoulos brilliantly goes through the list. So if he's convicted in all these cases and fits all these character traits that you've admitted he fits, you'd still support him and vote for him. And Chris Sununu goes, yeah, because a lot of people do. Which, by the way, before I play this next clip for you, is not an argument. It's not. First of all, it's not 51% of Americans supporting Trump. That's hilarious. He hasn't won the popular vote ever. So just population-wise, that doesn't make any sense. But even with the big portion, admittedly, of the country that does support Trump, that's not an argument for being okay that he's done all these horrible things and tried to overthrow our democracy and is a civilly liable rapist. That just means we need more people like you, Chris Sununu, to speak out against him, to wake up those people who are clearly in a deep, deep slumber, to stick in that analogy. But here's more from this interview. While you're watching, please make sure you are subscribed to this channel. It makes a huge difference. All it takes is just a clickety-click.
Tomorrow, that criminal trial, will your support for Donald Trump continue even if he's convicted in Manhattan?
Yeah, this trial is not going to have major political ramifications that a lot of people, I think it may have. When it comes to these issues, people see it more as reality TV at this point. They really do. And so, whether it's a conviction or what that conviction looks like, a lot of folks, they conflate all four of these different trials that he's in. I don't think it's good that he's going to be in the court, have to be in there probably 3 days a week, for a number of weeks.
Isn't that so interesting? He's doing it again. Appealing to public opinion does nothing to establish the legitimacy or morality of your principle. Okay? Saying a lot of people believe, you can reference it to bolster, to say, I believe this for the reasons I'll explain. And also, a lot of people resonate with that. Totally fine. Like when I talk about reproductive freedoms, the majority of Americans want that. So it's interesting, it's important, but it's not making an argument by itself for why your principles make any sense. And so then to say, yeah, people don't really care if Trump's convicted, which is not true based on the polls. If Trump's convicted, it's going to hurt him a ton, the polls reveal. But that doesn't make logical the fact that you're saying, I guess you don't care if he's convicted. If he's convicted of multiple felonies, someone who pretends like he's a part of the party of law and order is going to stand by him. Because God forbid Biden invests a little bit too much in infrastructure and makes sure that people have clean and reliable drinking water. Oh, the horror. My goodness. And here's more.
But I'm asking whether you're going to be swayed by it. You're a governor. No, you're an elected official. I'm asking whether you're going to be swayed by it.
Yeah, look, nobody should be shocked that the Republican governor is supporting the Republican president. Do you know what the real story is? The average American that has gone from Biden back to Trump, the average American that is feeling inflation and all these other issues, that says, look, through all this, whether there's a conviction or not, we want a culture change in Washington, D.C., and will continue to support the former President Trump. That's the real story, right? That Trump is leading in the polls across America in
False.
a lot of these different polls. So no one should be surprised by.
So lately we've seen a swing in Biden's direction, actually, which explains why his argument's so ridiculous. Let me play a little bit more before I rant even more.
My support, I think the real discussion is, America's moving away from Biden. That's how bad Biden has become as president. There's just no doubt about it, right? You can't ignore inflation. You can't ignore the border and say that these issues in the courthouse are going to be the one thing that brings Biden back into office. It's not going to happen that way.
I'm asking whether you're going to be swayed by it.
Okay, and now that clip is repeating. And before I play a little more, then we'll flash back to some past things that Chris Sununu has had to say. Just think about what he's saying. If he stands by previous things that he said about Trump, then his only argument now is, but a lot of people like Trump, so that doesn't matter. Which I think history has taught us, people supporting someone bad doesn't make the bad person any better, Chris. And also, if you're just saying that the polls show Trump's doing well, which again, Biden's leading now in a lot of national polls, it's very tight right now, but we've seen a solid shift in Biden's direction lately, then aren't you saying if the polls shift in Biden's direction, you're just a floppy, one of those balloon things outside of a store and you'll just blow in that direction? And you have no principles of your own. You're just looking around. Oh, so I guess people are happy with Biden now, so I'm going to go jump on that bandwagon. Your argument can't just be people think. And you're asserting that the majority of Americans don't like Biden and are going to vote for Trump. But elections are decided based on this next few months of advocacy from either side. And so Chris Sununu is choosing, based on what he thinks the polls show, to go along and help even more in the polls someone who he's admitted is a horrible, unfit president. And I am blanking on the particular language he's used, but he's alluded to those sorts of things with Donald Trump. And we'll look at some examples in just a second here. A really ridiculous argument. He also brought up inflation. Inflation keeps dropping under Biden. Obviously, there was that huge spike. And if you're honest at all, you understand it to be an aftermath of the pandemic related conditions and the recovery efforts under Trump and Biden, all those supply chain problems, and the story of Biden's presidency, as it's been with the entire economy, has been of trying to address those issues that he had to inherit because of this once in a lifetime economic, social, and public health crisis that his predecessor was mismanaging. And so many people try to omit that fact to help Trump, I guess, in these situations, which is incredibly dishonest. Just like with crime, there was a crime spike that started in 2020. One of the largest spikes in homicide rates, as we've gone over so many times, happened in 2020 while Trump was president, admittedly because of the pandemic-related conditions that Trump was mishandling. And so then Biden had to inherit, just when he came into office, this crisis on all fronts. And then we've recovered since then in a major way, the economy outpacing expectations and other countries in a pretty stunning fashion that nobody seems on the right willing to admit. And crime has been plummeting under Joe Biden, violent crime now lower than it was under Trump, even before the pandemic, and near 50-year lows. So he's dishonest. The border, do I have to go through the border thing again? It's right now MAGA Republicans obstructing this bipartisan border deal endorsed by the Border Patrol Union that Biden supports. And so right now Republicans are the ones preventing solutions on the border. Okay, here's more.
About that. I hate the election denialism of 2020. Nobody wants to be talking about that in 2024. I think all of that was absolutely terrible. But what people are going to be voting for, the reason I'm supporting not just the president, but a Republican administration. That's what this is. They want a culture change in Washington. All the rules and policies that pound down on the American people, all the wokeness, right? The fact that folks in Washington, liberal elites in Washington, want to stand on the shoulders of hardworking American families that built this country, defended this country, and tell them how to live their lives. They're angry. They're upset. That's the culture change.
Have an identity of your own, Chris. My goodness. Are you noticing? Whole interview is just appealing to popular opinion, which again, right now the polls don't even show what he's saying. So if Biden ends up winning, does he have to say, clearly people love being told what they want to do and all that, even though that's a ridiculous talking point too. If you argue in a moment when democracy's on the line. He referenced election denialism. What did Trump do, Chris, with the election denialism? Was it just saying things, or did he use those lies to justify a once in a country's history attempt to try to block the peaceful transfer of power, something that would have thrown us into a constitutional crisis, and something Trump's currently being prosecuted for on the federal level and in Fulton County? That's how bad it was that it crossed over potentially into illegality. And in this existential moment, rights on the line, Constitution on the line, he's talking about woke. Woke, Chris? Woke? You're missing the mark completely. You're just in la la land if you think woke is what we should be talking about right now. My goodness. Okay, here's some past things Chris has said.
We went through a pandemic. The institution stood strong. Let me put it a different way. Assholes come and go, but America is here
First
to
curse
stay.
word of the night.
Yeah, so he's referring to Donald Trump there. And then I'll show you this as Chris Christie was jumping into the race. Chris Sununu was commenting on it.
But this is the problem. All 12 of the other candidates need to cast the same type of criticism because it's not that we're there out there to beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't represent the Republican Party, right? He's the outsider. And we've kind of let him get away with kind of co-opting, I think, what are better traditional ideals of the Republican Party of limited government and local control. He wants to relitigate the past. And if we're going to be successful in the Republican Party, we got to move forward in the future. So I think Chris is a very good candidate. I think they're all really good.
All right. So Trump doesn't represent the Republican Party. And now Sununu is assisting and helping him to continue representing the Republican Party. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't that sort of a dishonest or inaccurate call out of hypocrisy? Because doesn't everyone do this? You criticize people in the primary and then you support the candidate. True. And I actually don't think it's horrible to have criticisms and then say, I still have those criticisms, but he's better than the alternative. And I say that to people who are on the left, who are upset with Biden for whatever reason, but acknowledge him to be the better candidate and thus are going to vote for him. And I encourage them to do so. But it's something different here. And if you're able to observe and just do a little bit of research, if you haven't already observed these facts, into what it was that Trump tried to do when he was president last time and trying to block the peaceful transfer of power, all the schemes that prosecutors have deemed to be illegal. And if you're not keeping up with what he's promising to do in a second term, openly authoritarian ambitions, including locking up political opponents, invoking the Insurrection Act to deploy the military onto the streets to crush demonstrations against him, going after media outlets he doesn't like, calling media outlets that he doesn't like criminals, and on and on. We've discussed that extensively. If you just, in a basic way, observe those facts, then you must understand Trump threatens our democracy in a way we haven't seen in a very long time in this country. And if you care about our constitutional process continuing and our democracy, it doesn't matter if you think Biden's too woke or something. Sounds funny to say, but if you think that he's too liberal or he's doing a too good job of expanding healthcare for veterans, or you just hate investments in American manufacturing, or you hate, like I said, the investments in infrastructure. You don't want Medicare recipients to have their prescription drug costs lowered. I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek because that's Biden's actual record, and Chris Sununu sort of talks in the abstract about Biden in a way that doesn't actually attach to his record. But if you actually are thinking Biden's too liberal, you obviously would set that aside for the sake of our democracy because of the reasons I just explained. And so this is not the same situation where you criticize in the primary, flip around in the general. This is existential democracy on the line and choosing to go with what's comfortable. Well, he's Republican, I'm Republican. All right, cool. Instead of speaking out against him like a bunch of people who used to work in his administration are currently doing, saying he'd end democracy, then you are violating the obligation that you have to our democracy, and you're failing. And this will be your legacy. And it's a horrible legacy. All the Republicans going along with this anti-democratic, unconstitutional figure, Donald Trump. And with all that context in mind, let's watch this epic moment one more time where George Stephanopoulos lists all this stuff to his face.
That's how badly America wants a culture change.
So just to sum up, you would support him for president even if he's convicted in classified documents. You support him for president even though you believe he contributed to an insurrection. You support him for president even though you believe he's lying about the last election. You'd support him for president even if he's convicted in the Manhattan case. I just want to say the answer to that is yes, correct?
Yeah, me and 51% of America.
Think about how crazy. I don't want to get on the whole rant again. He said that he agreed to the premise of Trump contributed to, at the very least, an insurrection. And he goes, yeah, trying to overthrow the government. But a lot of people like Trump. Yikes. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments.